So we will now move to our last session, the panel discussion, Frontier Yields, Investing in Mongolian Bonds. This session will be led by Mr. Billy Kewley, Head of Fixed Income Asia Credit at StoneX Group. Mr. Kewley brings extensive experience in global trading and emerging markets, having held roles at Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Mitsubishi UFJ Trust International, and now leads StoneX's Asia Credit businesses. Joining him on the panel are Ms. Ulemj B, CFO at Mongolian Mining Corporation. She currently serves as CFO, Executive Vice President at MMC, and as Chair of M Bank, bringing extensive experience in corporate finance. Mongolian Mining Corporation is Mongolia's largest privately listed mining company, producing coking coal, gold, and other metals, operating key coal and gold mines, and has been listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange since 2010. Ms. LinLin Ma, Co-CIO at Prudence Asset Management. Ms. LinLin Ma brings over 18 years of experience in Asia credit markets, having worked at Deutsche Bank before co-founding Prudence Asset Management in 2008. Prudence Financial Group is an Asia-based asset manager with offices in Singapore and Hong Kong, investing in Mongolia, while generating attractive risk-adjusted returns through a seasoned team, proprietary research, and active portfolio management. Mr. Gantulga, CEO at Mongolian Mortgage Corporation. Mr. Gantulga has extensive experience across public, private, and international financial institutions and has led MIK Holding JSC and MIK HFC LSC since 2017. MIK Group, through MIK Holding, listed on the Mongolian Stock Exchange, and MIK HFC operates across Mongolia with a focus on developing the secondary mortgage market and expanding access to housing finance nationwide. We now welcome all our panelists to join us on stage. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Firstly, I'm very aware that everyone's starting to get a little bit hungry. We're getting very close to lunchtime, so I promise you this conversation will be worth it. As we've already discussed, my name's Billy Kewley. I head the fixed income division for StoneX in Asia Pacific. It's an honor to represent StoneX here today. We've been a partner of the event since its inception, and it's a fantastic platform connecting international investors with Mongolian companies. So today's topic, investing in Mongolian credit. Honestly, when I got the email about the panel and the panelists, I think it's one of the most exciting discussions we've had across the forums. I can only assume that I was asked to moderate as the budget was spent on all of our panelists here with us today. I'd also like to thank Mr. Florian for doing my job in terms of setting the scene for Mongolia. It's recent economic performance. I think we're all very much aware excuse me, of the recent economic success in the region, but it hasn't come without its challenges. We've seen recently, issues from a political standpoint. We've seen a huge surge in issuance over the last number of years, and we've also seen volatility in asset prices. So I think we want to get into not just the good, but the bad. So to kick things off, LinLin, I know Prudence has been investing in Mongolia for a number of years. Maybe you can just talk us through what sparked your interest in the region to start with, and what's kept Mongolia as a core part of your portfolio.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thanks for the organizers for giving us this opportunity today to speak to many of our old friends and, of course, new friends as well. Prudence has been investing in Asia for the last 16 years, and Mongolia has always been a very important part of Asia, of course, through rough and thin. But I think in terms of what got us interested even more so was obviously at the onset of the finishing towards the end of the COVID, where China opened its borders and commodity price being a bit more attractive, and also valuation as well. And I think this is what got us more interested in the past few years in Mongolia to start with. And also when we do look at Mongolia, and obviously commodity being the past 10 years the main story, we're happy to see also after investing that the story has also diversified away just from the normal commodities. We've seen many banks these days, as well as talks of other projects and issuers in the region that are coming up as well. And really, I think over the past couple of years, we are happy to see that, at least on the sovereign side of things, the government has been very actively trying to manage this debt. Did quite a few transactions with various success. And also on the side of it, we see more issuance. Not only that issuers are different, but also they started issue bigger issuance size and longer duration. This is something as a debt investor in the region we're happy to see. Obviously, I think the last year, 2024, has been the biggest years, I think, for the primary transactions in Mongolia. We've seen at least 5 to 6 new issuers coming to the region in both private and public markets. I think this is a very encouraging sign, and obviously, investors within Asia and outside of Asia are now looking at Mongolia not as just a interesting sort of opportunity in a frontier market, but also as a core part of emerging market portfolio as well. On the countryside, I think we've seen a lot of encouraging signs as well in terms of the economy diversifying away from commodities, building infrastructure projects, and getting investment from the likes of India, China, Europe. We've seen renewable projects being discussed. We've seen infrastructure projects, such as the railway projects, being discussed and committed. And these are all, in our opinion, very encouraging signs for the country and as well as for the companies that are involved in these projects.
Thank you. I'm going to pass over to Mr. Gantulga, the CEO of Mongolia Mortgage Corporation. Mr. Gantulga, MIC has been a repeat issuer over a number of years in the market. It's a story that StoneX has followed extensively. One of the things that I've picked up on during interactions with investors is I still feel that international investors don't truly understand, the systemic role that MIC plays locally. So maybe you can just give us some background into MIC's history, its involvement regionally, and the role that it plays domestically as well.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gantulga. Indeed, it's not an easy task to get our name familiar with the international investors. It takes a lot of layers. But since our debut in 2019, it's been 6 years, and now we are understanding what it has to do to make our name familiar with the investors. First, it's not just about the company that investors have to be comfortable with. It's the story of the country. What is Mongolia? What's Mongolia's opportunity? First. The second is the financial sector itself, because we are part of the financial system. So who are the banks? What are the underwriting standards of mortgage products in the banking sector? And lastly, we came, who is MIC and what it does. So all this story have to be told not just by us, but other issuers. So the Florence presentation today and other presentations, hopefully now we can provide a complete picture, the sovereign issuance over the years. The last year or this year was the Ulaanbaatar city issuance, and then the DBM issuance, and then we had only one TDB representing the Mongolian corporate bank and commercial bank, but now this year we also have Kodon Bank, State Bank. So this gives the idea of what is the banking system in the country. So now we are building up where we stand within this. The most importantly, housing finance is very important because it's the primary need. We know that food, clothes, and shelter is the primary need for Homo sapiens. So our business is positioned in the mortgage loan, and therefore we work within the country. We are the only company that does securitization of the mortgage loans. We try to make mortgage loans affordable and accessible, And that is really dependent on how we can communicate our position, our risk position, our opportunity in the market to investors. In terms of the overall impact to the Mongolian economy, is that we work with commercial banks, so our company risk is apparently is a counterparty risk of the banking sector. And then also the Ulaanbaatar city issued 500 million USD bond, and the use of proceeds was to develop the Ger district area, which is essentially is built in new residential apartments. And then once this investment is done, the next question will be the availability of the mortgage products in the banking sector. And who does that is MIC, Mongolian Mortgage Corporation. We bring the money from offshore and we purchase those mortgage loans from commercial banks. Commercial banks will have cash and then they will further disperse the mortgage loans. And that is we are helping the country municipal government objective to combat with the externality costs in the form of air pollution, soil pollution. You know, the Ulaanbaatar city is one of the most polluted capital in the world during the winter time. And this is because of the Ger district areas are not connected with the proper infrastructure utilities. And therefore, our operation is also, if well coordinated with the government programs, we will achieve this lots of SDG goals that the government put. Indirectly, directly, out of 17 SDG goals, the housing finance operation that we're involved is affecting 14 out of 17 SDG goals. So, and for this perspective, our operation is very significant in a macro level and also in micro level, because in the end, you know, the borrower who receives the mortgage loan receives the apartment and owns the apartment, and within the household wealth, the apartment has a weight more than 50-60% of the overall wealth. So this translates into that the housing finance can help the government to eradicate poverty in a mass level. So maybe it's a financial weapon of mass destruction of poverty. If a good tailored mortgage program is penetrated in the system. Thank you.
Thank you. We caught up yesterday, and I thought one of the things that you mentioned was very interesting. Was US investors typically have a lot easier time of understanding the structure and, you know, the role that Mongolia Mortgage Corp play due to probably Fannie and Freddie Mae. Would you say Asian investors, just as a follow-up question, would you say Asian investors probably have the hardest time understanding, you know, exactly your role?
Well, yes and no, because it's not typical that housing finance company taps the market. It's usually the local currency investment. So those housing finance companies basically raise funds from pension funds or sovereign wealth fund of their respective countries. But for Mongolia case, our government is still working on improving, reforming this pension fund, sovereign wealth fund. So we are interim for the perceivable medium to long run. We will come back to this market. And once the pension fund will be there, probably we will transfer there. But still, housing finance in US is our system is more market driven, whereas US is also same. So as soon as I speak about securitization of mortgage loans, the US investors, they understand the whole operation and they are fine with the credit. They are only not satisfied with the volume. They need an index eligible amount, whereas our system, we are not able to digest like 1 billion USD, for example, for an annual basis, right?
Thank you. let's move on to Ms. Ulemj, the CFO of MMC. As we all know in the room, your company's been instrumental in terms of Mongolia's recent economic success. I think everyone's very excited about new products coming online this year, in particular gold, given the recent move in asset prices. What's your outlook for MMC's growth in the short to medium term and the broader implications for Mongolia's economy?
So MMC celebrated 15th anniversary of our IPO last month. So we were listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 2010. We were the first Mongolian company to offer its shares on the international listing. And that was after 1 year we started our greenfield project development back in 2009. And by 2012, our coal operations were fully ramped up to mine and produce 15 million ton of coal products annually. And we are today, I think we are still the only coal company with which is fully integrated washed coking coal producer with all infrastructure in place with no reliance on third parties. And so we stayed as a coal company for a long time because we were, we worried about the leverage and liquidity and, other things, and we are pretty conservative in that regards. And we finally decided to diversify, and in January 2023, we made the decision to invest and signed the investment and strategic alliance agreement to buy a 50% stake in a gold mining project. So I think at that time, gold price was about $1,800 per ounce. So before we started production, actually, the investment proved to be quite a good investment.
Well timed.
And we officially became shareholders in January 2024. So we've been doing the whole construction from greenfield to full-fledged production in about 20 months. So yes, we always talk about how difficult Mongolia is, but turning a greenfield project to a producing mine in 20 to 22 months is actually very, very fast, right? And if you are in Australia, Canada, probably it would take, I don't know, a few years actually, yeah? And so in terms of the near-term outlook, this year we are focusing on, ramping up and fine-tuning our gold production. Coal production is at full capacity for the last few years, and in the last couple of years, obviously, coal was doing $1 billion revenue, 500 EBITDA, 250 net profit annually. I mean, we're not going to do that this year. I'm sure you've seen coal prices, but I think in terms of the volume is strong, right? So in next year on the gold side, we are hoping to achieve about 85,000 ounces of production, which would help us to offset lower coal price. And on the coal side, we will not add any capacity, but we believe that with current coal prices, we'll be still doing about 15 million ton production. And in the medium term, we would be also focusing on our copper asset. We would be doing further exploration and additional studies and working on, converting estimates into reserves, right? So we are focusing on diversification, although for those who know MMC, and I think many of you know, we are very conservative, right? So we often look at the leverage and the earnings, how much cash we have. At the same time, we also realize that in Mongolia, not only funding the capital, not in terms of funding, but also human capital is also very much a big factor, and we are talking about not only the operators, staff, and etc., but also in terms of the management as well, right? So yes, we would be looking into additional interesting ideas, but in a more careful manner. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to just change gears slightly and talk a little bit about the political landscape, particularly over the last 12 months. I was in UB at the Mongolia Economic Forum when the coalition was announced last year. Everything sounded great, and I think, as we all know, that was fairly short-lived. We have had a Prime Minister removed. We've had a new Prime Minister come in, and just over the weekend we've now had a new leader of the MPP party announced. So maybe I can start with our friends from UB. I'd like to pose the same question to both of you. What's going on? Maybe you can share some insights. What's happening? Is this democracy at play? That seems to be the general theme, or is there something deeper here? And I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, well, I think, this year has been very, very interesting, right? And especially last few months was, I guess, many things, right? And you mentioned you being in the economic forum, and I also remember a lot of the events happening. Either it was the roadshow or some attending some conference, having investor meetings, and something was happening, right? So in some ways it was helpful because it diverted attention from lower coal prices we've been experiencing this year. But again, it's very hard to explain exactly what's happening, right? But I think that of course, in the past, right? And I'm doing this job for quite a long time and talking to investors for almost 20 years now, and we used to have a lot of changes in the government coalition all the time, right? It used to happen all the time, but it's only the last 5 years that have been very stable, and somehow we think that having same government is a sign of stability, right? So, but I think it's also a sign of democracy, which I think is a good thing in the longer run, right? There is still the same party, and of course it was a little bit messy, the previous exit, and etc. Right? But I think overall, it's a sign of positivity, I think. But what I am more worried is, for domestic and foreign investors, both, stable laws and regulations are important, right? So constant changes are challenging. But what is more challenging is when a new government questions the previous government's decision, right? And a lot of the populistic rhetoric, have been used against the mining companies, mining projects, and mining sector in general. And the mining sector being, accounting for 85% of total exports, and coal accounting for 50 to 60% of exports, going after those projects for short-term political wins is not really win-win for anybody, right? Even for those politicians in the longer run. So while I understand that populism is everywhere, but I hope that it's used a little bit more wisely by the government, right? Yeah. It is understandable when it's used by people on the street, but it's not really understandable when it's used by the government or the politicians in power themselves, right? But I think in general, I think Mongolia is, very peaceful and young democracy, which I think is in its, I think it's maturing in some ways, yeah.
Well, basically, Ulemj said everything. Personally, I think it's democracy in play. It's nothing strange or ridiculous when the government changes. Statistically speaking, since the transition of Mongolia to twin transition, like economic and political in the early 90s, the average government age was like 1.6. But yeah, the exception was the previous government. It was like 4 or 5 years to complete the tenure. The important thing, whenever the Mongolia issued bond, something happened in the country and political landscape. I remember the Mayor Brown was actually pointing out if there wasn't kind of this message coming to the market, it wouldn't be a Mongolia issue. So it was kind of and at that time the investors were very kind of what's going on, what's happening. But now I think that they are more familiar with the situation and they are not paying much attention unless it is very substantial. So what is happening in Mongolia is not substantial in a way that it's within the party changes. Still the ruling party is still the same. It's the MPP. It's just that people are changing within the party. And of course, as the economy develops, our politicians are also evolving. And they are more like understanding what is important in order to keep the economy growing. And one part of the equation is the FDI, and then also the foreign investors, the diversification of the economy, supporting private sector, PPP. All these ingredients are the now the political parties and politicians. They are trying to fix the situation, improve the situation, but in between there is always a Game of Thrones happens. So it's okay from my point of view. It's okay. Mongolia can be and should be an investment destination because it's a country with huge opportunities. It's just we lack to convey our story correctly and in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. LinLin, I'm going to come to you. So we have the biggest companies in Mongolia saying this is a non-event. During this period of political upheaval, we have ratings upgrades. Is this something investors are not worried about? Bonds have done very well during this period, despite wider markets being a little bit softer. What's your view? What's your opinion?
I think we've seen worse, right, in the past, you would say. I think during the downturn of commodity cycle, we've seen worse, clearly. And like I said, since the end of the COVID, I think we've seen a huge pickup in terms of conversation, dialogues that various companies, like MMC, MIK, Golem, these are all companies who are spokesperson of Mongolia. I think as investors, we meet these companies on a regular basis. If there's anything to do with the country, not just the companies themselves, we ask them. And I think I'm very appreciative of the fact that many of these companies are very open to discuss the sovereign question, the policy question, and this is a very encouraging sign. I think something that we don't have maybe 5 years back. And I think from the investor perspective, this is obviously not ideal. You want a very stable government, you want a stable policy, and also you preferably want a stable commodity prices. But I think what we've seen in the past few years is, particularly this year, is that we, like you said, we do see the sort of the changes in the government, but the message on the macro or physical policy front is quite consistent. Yep. I think this gives investors a huge comfort when investing in Mongolia. And also, like I said, like the rest of the panels have been talking about, the rating agency, it has obviously give a very affirmative decision regardless of this change in the current government. And I think this is also a testament to the fact that the international investment community are quite confident of the current government and the policy front as well. But I will implore to all of the Mongolia companies who are accessing international investors through bond or through equity, be a spokesperson of the Mongolia country, be open to discuss about political topics, be open to discuss about policies. And I think this is something that we would like to continue to see. And obviously where we have this kind of uncertainties, and whether it's a political front or whether it's any mining licensing issues, I think for us, we're absolute return investors. So for us, it's a huge opportunity for us to buy on a dip if there are any volatilities around the prices.
Great. So economic success over any political instability. As we've seen, economic success, should I say, we've seen the investable universe grow. Predominantly over the last 2 years, we've had first-time issuers. Golem banks come to market, UB cities come to market. We've seen TDB return to the markets for the first time in a long time. Obviously, an increase in the tradable universe is a positive. It brings more investor attention to the region as it grows in relevancy from an index perspective. But I think it's worth mentioning that within that, the performance has not always been positive, and there's been a varied response to some of the recent issues in the market. So, LinLin, what do you think in terms of, you know, and I know this is something we've spoken about a lot, you know, there's been varied levels of performance. What's your view on the increase? And from your perspective, what do you want to see from first-time issuers in Mongolia?
Maybe we can backtrack a little bit in discussing probably first and foremost what makes an issuance great, right? And I think there are several reasons. For one, I think for us it's not a very huge factor, but for a lot of long-only investors in this region, index is a huge matter. You know, whether you're into the Jackie index, which is 300 million for a corporate, or an MB index, which is a 500 million index. You know, I think these matters a lot for the larger global or regional long-only investors who track those indices. For us, I think we can look at both, whether it's index and non-index. I think these are flexible for us for as long as it's a great story and a good return. For two, I think the other part that's important, especially for frontier countries, is that the governance, the bond covenants, you know, especially first-timer, whether you follow a standard higher covenants or whether you're just a very short, truncated version of that, you know, sort of document package, I think it's very important for emerging market investors like ourselves. And third, I think is probably even more important than the first two for us is disclosure. You know, I think a lot of issuers may not be listed like MNC do on the overseas market, but disclosures, whether it's biannual, quarterly basis, engagement with investors, access to management, and also governance, I think is extremely important for investors in the region. We had the pleasure of obviously investing in Golem, in MMC and MIK, who are very, very good in these kind of engagements. And I appreciate the fact that many of the working partners, banks, you know, consultants who are encouraging, you know, issuers increasingly to do this kind of access, you know, corporate access, you know, conference like this one, and all of the roadshows that the issuers are doing for us to understand the company better. I think investment at the end of the day is not just the cold numbers that we see on the disclosures, but also about people. You know, when we do connect with people, you know, I think we get a better sense of, you know, how the company is run, what the economy is like, what are, you know, talking points, and I think these are very, very important, even more so than just the previous few factors.
Yeah, and I think there's a direct correlation, right, between the performance of first-time issuers against transparency, consistency in terms of communicating with investors. Maybe I can come to you, Ulemj. If you could share some of your experiences in issuing in international markets and you know, how you've maybe changed strategy throughout time to engage and work with investors.
I think in our case, the strategy is not to change, right? So, you know, LinLin mentioned about transparency and disclosure, and I think that's really our number one secret, right? We disclose everything fully, and we're always transparent, and we always, the management always allocates time to meet with investors and answer our calls, not only when things, you know, good, but also when things are complex, coal prices down, or when you are going through a downturn, right? And I guess second thing would be just to try to stay ahead of you know, various trends, like, you know, to changes in the financial sectors, changes in you know, various regulations or market trends or requirements, right? So what I mean is, for example, nowadays ESG is like important for everyone, but we started to disclose our CGP data already back in 2015. So we've been disclosing it, and we are still the only company in Mongolia that provides such disclosure. We are also the first and still only company in Mongolia that calculates and verifies GHG emissions in line with GHG protocol, which are verified by international verification companies, and our verification company is based in Singapore. And also we do TSM disclosure. TSM is the Towards Sustainable Mining. It's the Mining Association of Canada's Towards Sustainable Mining program that helps mining companies to manage key environmental and social risks. And there are a number of international national mining associations which does it. So we were the first international company to do this outside of the National Mining Association, because Mongolian Mining Association was not ready, right? So what I'm trying to say is that we do all these ESG and other things, and not just in terms of disclosure, but we also change our policies and actual practices ahead of what's coming, right? And on top of that, the main reason is really just to be compliant with investors' requirements, right? So that they would be able to invest in us. We also do 144A and Regas transactions all the time because of the disclosure and etc. We only done once a Regas transaction, but even then disclosure was in line with 144A. So we try to never do any kind of shortcuts, provide as much disclosure as possible, and stay ahead of, or at least in line with, all the changing requirements, because nowadays, investors and banks are very, very picky with whom they deal. Yeah.
Thank you. Gantulga, I'd like to ask, as being one of the long-term issuers from Mongolia, do you see any headwinds with regards to the surge in issuance over the last few years? Do you see any downsides to that, or do you think that there's enough demand for Mongolian issuers?
You mean the many Mongolian issues coming to the market?
Exactly.
Is it?
Yes.
Will it continue, or?
And will it have an impact on you as an issuing company?
I think it's a good news. For investors' perspective, I think you have lots of products to choose from. From our side, it's the story that we tell. It also the other issues are complementing our stories. So it's a good. I think it's a good that many local Mongolian companies tap in the USD bond market. I don't see it as a competition. Actually, it is reinforcing the perceived risk of Mongolia to a real risk. So my problem with investors is that when I do the roadshow meetings, I have the impression that investors are assigned as a perceived risk of Mongolia, not the intrinsic risk of the company, So I'm trying to convey that the Mongolian Mortgage Corporation, as a housing finance company, our position in the system is that we below the central bank, but above the banking system in terms of mortgage products, right? But no, the investors see us as another local Mongolian company, and there is not much difference between perceived risk of MIC and other commercial banks or other companies. That was in the past, but now that many companies tap in, I think there will be differentiation will come in the future. So the issue for MIC is that we want to reduce the borrowing cost. Yeah, that's the prime objective whenever I do the, and the borrowing cost will be reduced when the investors finally see the intrinsic risk of the company, and that's the challenge. Another challenge is that I would like to also address my government, because let's be a little bit smarter, because many countries tap in the bond market, whether it's sovereign or private sector, if there is a government support when we tap the market, we always also advertise that our business is related with the government programs, so we are kind of have a government support, but the investors are laughing. Well, you don't have guarantee, right? And if the government provides guarantee, then probably we will really can bring down the coupon like at least 200 basis points, right?
More than that, I think.
Something like that, yeah. Alternatively, another issue with our government is that we have, since it's the FX, we have to convert it into local currency, and then what Florian mentioned is actually a situation in the country that swap cost is also not very conducive for local companies to tap the market, because it's the mathematics again in play. In the end, it's the mathematics. The money that you bring to the country, will it be enough for you to earn and then repay back to investors? And that is that simple. So our government have to understand what it takes for MMC and what it takes for MIC to bring effects in the country, and in a macro or the global view, we are the taxpayers, right? And we are also helping the government to expand the fiscal activities, and from that perspective is also.
Maybe I can have a follow-up for you, LinLin, just on what Gantulga just mentioned. Obviously, there is a desire to reduce borrowing costs. I think every corporate issuer would love to have lower financing costs. Obviously, Gantulga's just mentioned about government support, implicit government support. For regional investors, and you've been a long-time supporter of MIC, for regional investors, what else do you think could be done in order to bring down financing costs for the company? Is it a case of further demonstrations from the government of support, or is there other things that you think at an independent level that the company could do?
I think in general, I mean, specific for MIC and probably for other issuers who are looking to do first-time issues and something, corporation is similar to MIC or closer to the government. I think it's important to bring out that story and repeatedly about how important, MIC and others are to the government or to the ecosystem. I think this story has been said, but probably not enough. I think there is very little understanding of how MIC is, how strategic the company is to the whole Mongolian economy. That's one. For two, obviously, any sovereign support in terms of letter of support, preferably guarantee would be the best, the most efficient way to reduce cost of funding. But aside from that, I think a continued sort of explanation of the story and also engagement. Now when issuers want to refinance or do liability management, you come to the roadshows and meet investors, but on a semi-annual basis, preferably quarterly basis, host calls and explain to investors what's going on with the business, how increasingly strategic this is to the sovereign, to the ecosystem. I think this is crucial because sitting so far away from Mongolia, I think the only way investors can understand how the company is operating is through the management. And I think this is extremely important. As you understand more, then obviously the more investors will be comfortable in purchasing and holding this bond. And then therefore the cost of financing will eventually come down in the next financing round.
So Gantulga, you're going to have to start utilising the direct flight from UB to Singapore a little bit more often. I think that's the key takeaway from that. Just to add on what LinLin's just said, I think additionally, if you look at Mongolia Mortgage Corp in the context of Asia high yield, there's also no direct comparisons. So I think the story and the communications with investors is incredibly important for the company. As we've mentioned, I think it's one of the kind of unsung heroes in Asia credit. And obviously the story for MMC has been very well told. But I think it's a very, very interesting time to be looking at the company. Okay, so we've talked about issuance, we've talked about supply. I want to just touch on performance, and specifically April. We had Liberation Day, we had Trump tariffs, there was significant volatility in markets. But Mongolian credits significantly underperformed the wider Asia high yield market and indexes. LinLin, why do you think that was the case?
Obviously, I mean, within, we talk about DMs and EMs and frontier. I think Mongolia being small economies have fewer issuers in EM market, and obviously it has the highest beta. That's just normal. And what we saw in April obviously was one of the biggest of recent years kind of macro uncertainties. So it's natural for investors who would panic on the back of that. And we've seen that. It's not just Mongolia. We've seen issuers, higher issuers in India falling 20 points as well. So that's not unusual. Welcome to Asia. And also on the side, I think what could be an interesting point is that if the investor understand with a company like MMC, like Golem, like MIK, this would be a great opportunity for you to buy things significantly cheaper than before. And also, I think, as mentioned again and again, I think in cases like this, it's important for us to have that call with the company. Yep. I would probably run up Ulemj B, I'd probably run up Gantulga. What's going on? Is everything fine? How do you see this? If you get a certainty and comfort from the management that things are doing all right, there's nothing to worry about, then you worry about your performance, like mark-to-market that bond. And then eventually when the macro news goes away, things recover, you make money. So I think this is, it's not unusual, like I said, but I think it presents opportunity for sure.
And Ulemj, were you surprised during that period of time?
Yes and
yes.
no, because with our existing outstanding bonds, we priced I think end of March, and we just received the funds on April 3rd, right? And then less than not even 2 weeks, and investors are calling. Are you going to do buybacks? No, we just got the money, right? We're not going to do buybacks. And I guess to some of the investors that I know quite well, I told them I'm waiting until it reaches 70 cents, which I think didn't help. But some of them,
very aggressive.
But I think, things were understandable, right? Because technically speaking, I was trying to, explain it to them that, every second quarter, every April, bonds go down. We had the same call every April, plus on top of it, it was Trump, right? So I said, we have 5 years, 5 years to go, so why to worry, right? But it was very challenging, and I don't think it was like first time when our bonds performed so bad right after issuance, right? But I think today, hey, it's above par, everybody's happy. They don't remember having such discussion with me, right? They always think that they stayed calm. Sorry, just to add on the question to Gantulga earlier about all the issuances, right? First of all, it's really good to have more issuers and more issuances from Mongolia because it makes the market bigger, right? So more people are talking to investors, more investors are interested. But there are certain aspects, personally, I kind of don't understand. For example, I see some issuances, especially the quasi-sovereign ones on the Vienna Stock Exchange. I never even thought that was a possibility, and I now have to ask my banks why you never offered me such easy route, right? Also, some of the underwriting process and book building, it seems more like a private type of deal, not really. Especially the quasi-sovereign ones should be doing it, right? So from that perspective, I'm a little bit worried when you see these type of transactions, especially from the quasi-sovereign issuers, right? In some ways, whatever works for the investor and the issuer, it should be fine. But when I look at the Mongolia market, it's our market as well, right? So we just hope that this does not create some kind of shortcuts which could create problem for us all at some point.
And impact broader investor sentiment to the region. Yeah, of course. Okay, so as we look to wrap up the panel, I want to pose one more question to all of you. And that is, where does Mongolia go from here? Obviously, we've seen fantastic success over the past 2-3 years. How does that continue? What are the tailwinds? What are the headwinds? My colleague Charles Moser in New York actually did a presentation saying the road to investment grade for Mongolia. Do we think that's realistic? Where do you see the country going in the next 5 years? I'll start with you, LinLin.
Certainly, if it goes to investment, we'll be happy. But I think it's on the right path for sure. But now that we see sovereign, quasi-sovereign, we see banks, commodity companies, but we want to see more as well. Whether there'll be infrastructure companies, whether there will be any renewable energy company come to the market. I think we need with and the depths. So now we have the depths. We have issuers who can print, 500 million. We have issuers who can print, small and big, But we need also the breadth of issuers, different kind of sectors. And I think that's what we're looking at when, obviously, the sovereign upgrade is a great thing to have, kind of uplift the whole boat. But, to invest more is even better. No, I think from here, I guess the only way is up. And we welcome more issuers and more diverse conversations with the investors that looks at Mongolia.
Great. Gantulga?
I think the Mongolia story will be prevailing the same. Nothing big will happen, but the geopolitical situation will also shape the perceived risk of Mongolia. We will see more infrastructure bonds coming to the market because Ulaanbaatar city, the debut bond, it will be followed by other bonds. Gir district area is where the 50% of households live in those areas, and it's a tremendous, it's a significant amount of investment that is required for the next 5 to 10 years. So I believe infrastructure bond will be coming to the market. Also, I believe that there will be energy-related bond issuance will be also coming to the market, green energy related. And also, we will see more social and sustainable linked bonds coming to the market because I think the banks will now exploring this opportunity. We are also trying to link our future bonds with the sustainability linked or green linked, yeah. So those are, I think, in near the 5 years. In the longer terms, it's difficult to say. But as you may see, the Mongolians are very entrepreneur. You see the non-bank financial institutions are conquering the Central Asia. This will continue to happen. It won't be just a financial sector, but I think it will be more on a investment basis, like mining investment. It's already started, and we will see lots of Mongolian companies will invest abroad, not just in Mongolia. So this is also requires some significant investment. So investors will have lots of Mongolia stories.
And finally?
Well, I guess what's next? I think next is the next conference or next forum, right? Because when we attend forums and conferences, private sector and politicians, we always say the right things, right? And but whether it becomes a in practice, whether it happens or not, it's very hard to say, right? But I don't think there is nothing. I think the formula is there, and I think that's what everybody talks about, right? First, diversification of the economy. But before diversification of the economy, let's diversify mining sector, right? People think Mongolia is a mining country. It's not really a mining country. There are not many new projects. And when you look at the export, it's just coal and copper. Well, at least diversify away from coal. That's the whole world is doing, right? We talk about it's a mining company, about a mining country, lots of projects, but it's hardly the new projects, right? It's OTTT. And that's it. And our gold project supposedly very small for us, right? But apparently it's one of the bigger projects that's happening in the country. So let's diversify, starting from diversification of the mining sector. Let's focus more on the private sector. Of course, we talk about the investments in terms of the attracting foreign direct investment and etc. But there's so many numerous smaller laws that kind of restricts. And I think some of them Florian touched upon, right? Even with the banking, right? We have a law that the banks need to do IPO and diversify investor base, but somehow it's very difficult for them to do IPO abroad, for instance, right? So let's just work on the smaller laws and regulations and make smaller steps towards what we have been saying in all the conferences.
I think just as a final point, I think the panel's done a great job at kind of painting the picture in terms of fundamentals, but the technical picture from a market standpoint remains very favorable. One of the reasons StoneX remains extremely bullish on the region. There's no other Asian high-yield sovereign story in Asia, to be honest, a liquid one. We had a recent Laos deal, that's a standalone deal. There's one outstanding Papua New Guinea sovereign bond. So Mongolia really benefits from tailwinds in terms of market and index eligibility. So we continue to foresee growth in the region. I'm getting shooed off the stage, so I'd just like to say thank you to the panelists and thank you to everyone for listening today.